very interested in it. The political part of that construction is very much connected with Alessandro School in San Bernardino. Alessandro was also a junior high for years, probably equal in length for the 16 years of life for Wilson Junior High. When the government under Franklin Roosevelt and the WPA began to hire people to work on public projects, schools there, we were still segregated, and there was still that heavy prejudice among some of the populations, both in San Bernardino and Colton. And Ruth Tuck makes that very clear when she talks about what was happening in the surrounding cities.
Now, who is Ruth Tuck?
Ruth Tuck was a sociologist, anthropologist, although University of Redlands didn't have an anthropology major in those days. Much of her work is in anthropology. She wrote about San Bernardino in early 40s, very early 40s, late 30s maybe. She wrote a book called Not with a Fist. And the book is as a result of her master's thesis at Redlands. And she did a lot of study about the prejudice situations and the apartheid situations in San Bernardino and Redlands and Colton, mostly San Bernardino. But one of the things that she mentions very clearly is that Alessandro was built for a reason. There were 3 other junior high schools in San Bernardino: Arrowview, Sturgis, and Richardson. And Sturgis had some Mexican Americans, Latinos going across the track to Sturgis.
Yeah, that was down San Bernardino.
Yeah, when they were good football players, like our friend Hiram Diaz was selected to go there because 9th grade football was very big in those days. Very few Latinos, Mexican Americans went to Arrowview. No, very few, unless they were sons or daughters of the consul or something. It was very segregated. So one of the ways to have folks stay in their area is to say, well, they're happy. They're happy with their own kind. Ergo, Alessandro and Wilson. Before that, 7th and 8th graders would go to Roosevelt across by Colton High School, which is a junior high. My oldest sister went to Roosevelt. But then in 1938, keep them down there, another part of segregation. I remember Wilson, when I was at Wilson, I don't remember anybody who was not Mexican American. No one. Later on, of course, 10, 12 years ago, when the school district decided to bring the Grand Terrace kids down to Wilson, it caused some angst.
Ernie, even though we had some population on Jefferson, just south of Wilson and Garfield, a large population of Anglo residents, we still didn't have them at our schools?
No. One of the things that I remember very vividly was the big yellow bus, school bus, coming down 7th Street to Congress, hanging a right, and there was a settlement,
yes,
all in there, of employees of the gas company. There was natural gas distribution, big tanks there in that corner. And then on Congress, where it crossed the old highway, which continued to be 8th Street, there were some families there, and a couple of others within walking distance of Garfield, but they didn't go to Garfield. The bus picked them up and went in front of Garfield all the way to Lincoln.
Ah,
Yeah. And so those things were very evident. And in those days, as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, I didn't look at it and say, wow, this gross prejudice or whatever. I just thought, hey, maybe those people are paying to get their kids over, so they won't have to walk the 1 block.
yeah. And what are some of your experiences at Colton High School? Did you play any sports or were you in the band or?
My experience in Colton High School was better probably than many of my peers. But I must tell you, not many of us went to Colton High School from Wilson. I think there were 72 in my 8th grade class. And
What year
in
was that?
those days we were 8-1s, 8-2s, 8-3s, and 8-4s or whatever. We were tracked. That was in 1944. I believe out of the 72, I believe 18 of us went on to high school. Now, the reasons. I remember the twins, the Flores twins, who were friends of mine. We were older. As I said, I started first grade at 7 years of age. Others started when they were 8. So a lot of these fellows, and not so much the girls, because employment for women in industry, of course, was very, until the war got really going. And you were close to being where Rosie the Riveter was. The fellows were hired by Kaiser at age 15, 14, 15. And a lot of jobs were available during that part of the war. And so that was one part of it. The other part of it, no te vas a casar. About 18 of us from Wilson to Colton High. I was a musician by that time. I had played in little conjuntos there in South Colton. South Colton was very interesting. There were almost any Sunday in they say 1941, 42, right in there. Any Sunday that you went around, there was a jam session going on somewhere. Of course, in the following 2 or 3 months, it was no longer a jam session with the same guys because they had been drafted or whatever. And so it was I could say it was a barrio musical thing around there. There were a lot of musicians. So when I went to Colton High, I got in the band, I played in the orchestra. And also, I became a pretty skilled track person in cross country. So sports are one way that things get integrated better. And if you're successful in sports, unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it was. Mm-hmm. My friend Gil, whom you mentioned, one of the smartest people I've ever known. He was a brilliant young man. So he got involved with the newspaper reporting. He was in all those kinds of literary activities and also a successful athlete. So my time at Colton High School was not one where I felt out of place, except for the very first time that in my English class as a freshman, the teacher came up with one of those very inventive kinds of opening sessions. What did you do last summer? So, hey, I did a lot of stuff, really. Oh, we went here, come on, La Pizca is where I was, so I was traveling.
You were camping.
Camping, yeah, camping in Hemet, picking apricots. But she asked us to speak, and then Benny Alvarez, I don't remember if you remember Benny.
Yes.
Benny and Irma Sosa and Connie Beltran and Dave Beltran and I were in this college prep, sort of with all the other kids there from Roosevelt. And of course I got up to speak. I didn't know I had an accent. until she called me first, and I got up and started speaking, and everybody laughed. So that was an indicator. And Benny was worse, so I laughed at Benny.
Now, of the 18 people that started high school, how many of them graduated that you know of?
I would say 12, 13 maybe. Yeah. And in those days, the speakers for graduation were not particularly always grade-wise. It was an important factor, but it wasn't a grade point average to say you're the valedictorian, the salutatorian, and all this. They just selected 4 people. And the students were very much involved with that selection. So I was selected to be speaker at my graduation among 3 other people, and so was Gil Garcia the following year.
Your cousin.
My cousin, yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't talk about was how impressed I was as a kid with 7th Street. You know, the guys who wrote the book you're going to, they mentioned the bars, and boy, they were, they were very active there.
Well, they refer 7th Street to the Broadway of South Colton.
Yeah, if you compare it to a very small village someplace, but it was an important thing for us, and probably the most important thing that I remember anyway, Tom, was a good mechanic. There was a good mechanic there who could take care of your car and knew all this stuff. 3 barber shops and Martinez Bakery. And then, of course, right in the corner, the store, the general store on M and
Cervantes.
Cervantes. And Cervantes, of course, the brother, we known as Butch, because he was a butcher there, and they had Cervantes had this huge side of meat service.
Right.
So it was very impressive there. Then later on, of course, in the 40s, Brill established his shoe store right across from Cervantes and Aguilera's little business. But to me, it was when my mom sent me with my 15 cents to get a haircut and send me on Saturday mornings to buy semitas. They were nice and hot, out of Martinez Bakery. But you had to be very, very, very careful crossing the street there, because that was the major highway, 395. And sometimes when the trains were going through, the traffic would be backed up all the way. They're going north, and of course south was empty because they were backed up on the other side of town. But I was always impressed with that. The fiestas that were held there, the Fiestas Patrias in the park, what is now the parking lot of El Sombrero, and then the corner right across from N Street and La Cadena. There's now a little store there, and many other activities that were
And
fun.
the church was also kind of on 7th Street, on L and 7th.
Yes.
San Salvador was
Yeah, right in
that
the corner
area.
there. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then you have Rodriguez Market also, and on the corner of O and 7th, that was the other market that we had
yeah.
there. So
Aguilera had a market on M Street, and then of course Rodriguez. In 1943, 42, 43, when the braceros started coming in, it created a new industry in South Colton. Some of it was very healthy, other one was not so, because entrepreneurs took advantage of the workers coming in and to work. It's like it reminded me sort of the company store. you know, where people worked for the railroad, and there was a store that was owned by the railroad. And so, yeah, they could go buy a lot of stuff, but a lot of the times they would exhaust all their coming pay just in that store.
Right.
Because it was a company store. One of the things we didn't mention that was very important was the railroads had section houses. And the section houses had the people, the families